Well, thank you, Ashley, and thanks to the whole team for showing up today and for having me. Excited to talk about accessory dwelling units. It's all we do at Snap ADU. We are a design build contractor. Our team is based in North County, San Diego, but we handle all of Greater San Diego at this point, and we have team members kind of throughout the city. I'm going to share my screen. Now we have more people coming here. One second. Got you all here. Here we go. Can you guys see? Can you see my screen yet?
Yes.
Yep, looks good.
Okay, perfect. So quickly on our history before we dive into ADUs specifically. We formed Snap ADU about 3 years ago. That's my co-founder, Mike Moore. So he'd been running as a general contractor for about a decade under the brand Moore Construction, did high-end home renovations and new construction projects, and was starting to specialize in exclusively ADUs. I was coming at the market as well, but from a very different angle than him, and our skill sets are complementary. So he handles our production side. I handle our business development side, also involved in all the website and content that we put out for folks like yourselves. And behind us, we have a team now of 16 employees plus an army of some subcontractors. We handle all of our design and permitting in-house. We also have superintendents out in the field that are managing the construction crews, all the different trades. So, we've grown to support a pretty big base of work that we have going on. So throughout, the city of San Diego, you can see here, and then all the way up into kind of basically lined by the military base, the ocean, and roughly the 15 is kind of our service area. So we've got about 50 and just more than that, 66 in progress throughout the county. We've completed nearly 30 of them. So we have a lot of experience in this space. We also have all this up on our website. If you're curious what we're building, like in your area, you can see all of our project photos and what we have going on. We've been recognized in the space mainly because we do specialize and because of the volume of ADUs that we're doing. So I'm excited today to kind of wrap all that up for you guys, give you the 45 minutes or so of what you need to know about ADUs and how we can help. And I'm sure a lot of you already know about the different benefits of adding an ADU or you wouldn't be here, but at a high level, folks are building them for rental income, whether it's their first foray into having a rental property and they want to do it right there on their own lot, or they might be an investor that has a lot of properties and they're adding these to an existing duplex or maybe even a multifamily complex. You can add ADUs to it. And then a big chunk of our clients, about 60% of our clients, are adding ADUs for family members, whether that's their mother-in-law or maybe a young adult who can't afford the housing market. So a lot of ours are built for families. And then lastly, whether you're building it for rental or for family or for some combination, people are building these to add value to their property. And we have a lot more resources about, an example of the ROI and all that kind of a detailed analysis on our website. I won't go into that today, but if you would like that, I'd be happy to guide you to that on our website. So what we will cover today is what and where you can build kind of at a high level, design and cost, getting into the real numbers and the real process of what that looks like, and then how Snap ADU can help you and what we would typically do with both our clients and then also with realtors. And then at the end, I'm going to try to save at least 10 to 15 minutes for any and all questions that you guys have. So getting right into what and where we can build. For those of you that have kind of been keeping track of this, the state since 2019 has passed a series of regulations making it easier to build ADUs kind of from the top down. And then the cities are able to add their own ADU regulations that at a minimum have to comply with the state rules, but can be more lenient if they'd like. And we'll talk about San Diego in that regard. So what I'm going to talk about is kind of the floor that the state has set. So for starters, there are no minimum lot size requirements. It could be on any size lot so long as you're meeting the setback and ratio requirements. As far as the setbacks, that refers to how far the ADU has to be from the property line. So for the state level, they have said that a city has to allow at least 1,000 square foot 2-bedroom unit or at least an 850 square foot 1-bedroom unit. The state level also gives guidance of having a 1,200 square foot up to 16 feet in height. So most cities who have not like set their own regulation leave it just defaults to this 1,200 level. Some cities like Carlsbad have said, you know what, let's set it at the 1,000 and the 850. We don't want to have giant ADUs. Some places like Poway have said, actually, let's do bigger ADUs. And they've said you can build a 1,500 square foot ADU. So it all varies by city. We can talk about that in a moment, like how to kind of get the quick and dirty answer for the city that your property might be in. But that's kind of at the high level what we're looking at. Owner occupancy has been waived for ADUs for those built in, at the time, it was a 5-year moratorium. It sunsets December 31st of 2024. So ADUs don't require owner occupancy if they're built before that time. We expect that's going to get extended as well. But they can't retroactively require occupancy on ADUs. So once we pass that timeline, the ADU can still be rented out, doesn't have to be owner occupied. Parking requirements have effectively been removed as well. There's no parking requirement at all if you're within a half mile of public transit. You also don't need to have parking if you're converting a space like a garage. Even when you do have to add parking though, it's not as onerous as it might sound. It's simply designating on your construction documents, designating a parking space, showing where somebody could park. You don't have to like actually mark it out in real life. It's simply just showing where they would park. So it's really not much of a hurdle, even when you do have to provide parking. Other important regulation changes on single family zoned lots. You're allowed to build an ADU and a JADU. A JADU stands for a junior accessory dwelling unit. So that's like a second one you can build that's under 500 square feet and attached. It's part of the main residence. It has to actually be converted from existing space, like a garage or a storeroom. In other areas, people do them in their basements. We don't have basements here, obviously, for the most part. So you can build an ADU that can either be detached from the property or from the main home, and that's what we do. We only do detached construction. You can also do an addition that is an ADU. If you do an addition, it can't be more than half the square footage of your main house. So you can have this ADU. You can also add this junior ADU. They do have owner occupancy requirements. So if you throw on a JADU, you have to live somewhere on the property to take advantage of that. My real take on JADUs is that they're not that great of a deal because they do have that owner occupancy requirement. They can only be up to 500 square feet. So we don't see a lot of these happening, but you might hear about them. So that's the skinny on it. As far as what you can build on multifamily lots, and that would include even duplexes, you can build 2 detached ADUs on multifamily lots. A lot of folks, will just double the number of units that they have on their duplex lot by doing this. In the city of San Diego, there's actually a bonus program that will allow you to build more than this, both on single family and on multifamily lots. It's called the affordability bonus. I can, again, get you guys more information on that if you want to go down that rabbit hole with your clients. But in a nutshell, for every affordable ADU you build, you are allowed to build 1 more market rate ADU. So that means on a standard duplex lot, only in the city of San Diego now, we're talking, you can actually build 4 ADUs, and that would be 2 per this law, 1 affordable, and then 1 more market rate. So it's a lot of ADUs. You have to comply with all the other requirements. So you would have to comply with things like the coverage ratios for the lot. And we could look into all that depending on what, where you're building, but you'd still not be able to go over like the density for an area. But many people are taking advantage of this as well and adding even more ADUs in the city of San Diego. Other important regulation changes, a lot of the fees have been waived. So if you looked at ADUs, 5 years ago, you might have found that it was going to cost you, $30,000, $40,000 to get one permitted. Now it averages out to about $10 a square foot for the remaining costs that haven't been waived by the state. So for 1,000 square foot unit, you're probably going to pay about $10,000 in fees. And that's things like school impact fees, sewer connection fees, plan check, that kind of stuff. HOAs no longer can just straight up say no to an ADU. They cannot reasonably prohibit the development. Of course, reasonably is a very debatable term. So we tell people it's not really a question of if you can build it. If you have an HOA, it's how much resistance might you get. Candidly, the ones that we've built in HOAs, we've done a lot by now, probably 10 of them in HOAs. As long as we're running that design by the ADU or by the HOA early on and getting their feedback, we're finding it's pretty simple to make those changes to the exterior of the unit so that it complies and the HOA has to let it go through. And lastly, application reviews have a bit more restrictions on them for the cities, meaning that they're having to turn these around a little bit faster. What we are seeing is there's still a pretty massive timeline for some of these different municipalities. So like I said, a lot of the regulation is at a city level. So you're going to have to know kind of what you can build in each one of those. We do have, pages on our website for every single one of these cities that will show you, like, here's the key, things about size and distance and all those things. But at from a timeline perspective, what we're seeing is the biggest difference is how long the cities are sitting with the permits. So just the units that we got permitted in the last 18 months or so, the number of months that the city had it just with them, this is taken out any time we had reviewing our side of it and making edits. Places like Oceanside, 2.5 months or so in their court, which is pretty darn good in the world of permitting. City of San Diego, Escondido, Chula Vista, 4 or 5, even 6 months in their court. So it really does vary based on municipality. And a lot of the cities are super backed up with their own staffing shortages that we're seeing in a lot of different industries. The other thing to keep in mind, in addition to the city that you're building in, there's different overlay zones like coastal or high fire. You can build an ADU in a coastal zone. Depending on which coastal zone you're in, there's just going to be different requirements. So all of that will affect the cost and the timeline. So the intent of this session is not really to get you fully up to speed on any one of these. I more just want you to know that you have this as a resource available on our website. For people going to snapadu.com, under About Us, there's a section called Service Area. And under all of these, you can click into any of these cities and you're going to see a snapshot of, can you build this type of unit? Do they allow roof decks? Can it be attached? All the key questions you probably have about the city are covered in here. So that's even where our own team goes when we're talking to clients, just to keep all this stuff straight. So you have the latest and greatest at your fingertips there. So that was kind of the crash course in regulations. Anybody have any burning questions about what and where you can build before I move on to design and cost? It's okay if you don't, but I just wanted to pause for that.
Not a question. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Ashley.
No, I was just going to make a quick comment. I didn't realize ADUs could be up to 1,500 square feet. I mean, that's larger than a lot of homes that we'll even sell. So that was just interesting. Was that something recently that was changed, or has it been like that for a while?
That is just the city of Poway.
Okay, that's right.
They've allowed that, I want to say 2 or 3 years now.
Okay.
The constraint there, so typically if it's detached, it's not related to how big the main house is. But in Poway, if you're going to build bigger than 1,200 and get all the way up to that limit of 15, it has to be less than half the size of the main house. A lot of the houses out there are pretty big though. So yeah, a lot of folks are able to do that.
Cool. I thought that was super interesting. So
yeah.
I've got 2 questions here. So one is on the HOA and then the other one is San Diego requirements versus individual city requirements.
Yes.
So can San Diego, if you have a client, let's just say that lives in Carlsbad, and they are obviously restricted as to what can be done here. But the city of San Diego says, hey, you can do blah, blah, blah. Can they actually use the city of San Diego requirements to overrule what Carlsbad requirements are?
So it won't go across cities like that. Where you might see that happening, and will see that happening, is at the state level. So if the city puts in place a regulation that violates the state, we would push back on that. But as far as say that, and I'm glad you asked for the city of San Diego, because they are by far the most lenient. They actually allow you to have a 0-foot setback from the property lines instead of just the 4 foot that the state has said is a minimum. So there you can actually, go even closer, but that doesn't affect what you can build in Carlsbad. Just because City of San Diego said you can do that, Carlsbad has their own regulations, so they are separate.
Okay, the reason I ask is because I'm currently on my HOA, and we literally just went through this ordeal, and it was like, oh my gosh, like where do we begin?
Yeah.
Okay. So
And-
then, and they tried to throw that out at us. They try to say, well, the City of San Diego says that we can, but we're trying to say, no. Carlsbad says you can't.
Yeah, you're
It's
absolutely
4
right.
feet. It's 4 feet. Okay, so that's good to know. Okay, so the next one is with the HOA. Can the HOA actually tell the persons on the particular style of, like, in other words, let's just say the homeowner says, yes, I want an ADU, but we want it to be this modern style, but yet their home is this, ranch style, or it's like, a Spanish style. HOAs usually we have the thing where we say, hey, look, it has to match the style of your home. Does the HOA still have control of saying that, or can the homeowner just say, guess what, screw you, I'm going to build this ADU that looks like it's downtown in the industrial zone?
Well, I would say in general, whether you're in an HOA or not, most cities have adopted language similar to this, for Carlsbad as the example, where the ADU has to be architecturally compatible with the main unit, or they'll say with the character of the neighborhood, different twists on that.
Okay.
And so even if you aren't in an HOA, we're almost always matching the general vibe of the main house. And I got to be honest with you, I've wondered myself how some of these modular companies are doing it, because a lot of their exteriors are super modern and it's not consistent with the main home. And I candidly don't know how they're getting them permitted, or if they are getting them permitted.
Yeah.
But as far as the HOA, the kind of tweaks that we've had to make have been more on like window style or architectural details above the door and those kinds of things. So usually what we do is design it with kind of what the client already wanted during feasibility and design. Like maybe they already wanted to match some of the details, right? And then we'll send that feasibility report that shows the high level design to the HOA, and they'll get back to us with any comments on that. We don't want to wait on them though, because some of them are slow. So we'll go ahead and do our regular thing with sending it into the city as well. Then we'll marry up any comments we get back from the HOA when we do that first round of revisions for the city. So if they say, actually, guys, you got to do more, gingerbread stuff to make it match, we'll add it then. So we kind of have to be moving on both fronts at once, with the HOA and with the city, because otherwise you're just going to take forever.
Yeah, for sure. And have you guys come across any situations where the homeowner that has the ADU built maybe has like the high glass doors, and then maybe the way the sun reflects off of it hits the neighbors and it blinds them in, and they're like kitchens or whatever, and then they want to dispute it? And if so, how do you control that?
Yeah. We haven't been involved in any disputes like after the fact. Regarding the windows and how all that plays out, there are building code requirements that only allow you to cover X% of a wall if you're within like X feet of a property line. So that usually looks like only like 25% of a side that abuts another property can even have windows there anyway. So there's some checks like that. But as far as the situation you just mentioned, I mean, I think the best the best proactive thing you can do with that is during that design process, taking stock of the way the ADU is situated on the property early on in the process, so you can see all the window openings. We can talk about that and how that feasibility process looks. But you're right, sometimes this stuff doesn't come to light until construction, and we will have people come back and say, oh, I didn't visualize this. I'm like looking right at my client, my neighbor, what do I do? And, sometimes you can make those changes in the field and you have to request an edit with the city, and it takes more time. But the sooner you can get that stuff in, the better. I don't have a great answer for you though on the shining the light with the neighbor. Yeah.
For sure. Thank you.
Sure. Great questions. Appreciate it. Let's go into design and cost. If you guys have other questions, we can definitely do some at the end too. So folks always ask us, what should I keep in mind when I'm picking my design? And back to the website, just kind of give you guys an intro to this. We have a whole section on floor plans on our website to give folks a jumping off point. You can filter by how big you want it, if you want to have it dual suites or not, like if you're going to do it for roommates. Or if you just like want to go in and see all the 3 bedrooms in one spot, you can filter that way too. So we probably have about 40 floor plans on our website right now. And so when we're advising clients, we do ask them to think about resale value. And I'm sure that's top of mind for all of you guys as well. So if somebody's thinking about building some huge 1 bedroom for their mother-in-law, like 1,000 square foot 1 bedroom, we do usually push people to think about adding a second bedroom. Because even if, you know, mom doesn't necessarily want it today, it offers more flexibility for down the road. Also thinking about ADU size thresholds. So when you do poke around looking at ADU plans, you're going to see a lot that come around 2 different sizes, around 750 and then under 1,000 square feet. There's a couple of reasons for that. One is you can't go above 1,000 square feet in some jurisdictions, like we talked about. 2, if you're under 750 square feet, you're going to trigger fewer fees than if you go over that. There's a certain set of stuff that kicks in at 750. It's to the tune of maybe $3,000 to $5,000, depending on the city that you're in. But point is, if you were thinking about building a 2 bedroom and you're like, oh, I'm thinking about 800 square feet, we might tell you to stay under that 750. You can still comfortably fit a 2 bedroom in there, and you wouldn't be triggering as many costs on the permitting side. On that note of cost, we think it's super important to align the design with budget early on. Back when we weren't design build, we just used to just only build from other plans. We'd have folks come to us and say, you know, I've got the set of plans from my architect, and we'd come back to them with a cost, and they'd be horrified at the actual build cost. Because even if architects are tuned in, there's no way they're going to have as real time of information as a builder does, who's constantly updating the costs back into the design process. So we find that to be a big benefit of design build, is that we do commit early on. But even if you're not going that route, even if you're, you know, your client is thinking of going the architect route, just always pushing on that budget and making sure that you're getting a reality check with a contractor sooner than later. On that note, value engineering, all of our plans have incorporated standard dimensions, not only for cost, but for availability. So COVID supply chain issues were a real thing. I'm sure you've heard about them. They continue to be an issue. So availability of things like appliances is just, you know, more difficult than it was prior to the pandemic. Same thing with things like shower inserts and items of that nature. So to remedy that, we have tried to build in standard size things like tubs, standard size windows, where you're not really affecting the livability of the unit, but we're just reducing the number of variables and things that can go wrong and just limiting it to stuff that we actually can find. And then lastly, we ask people not to start from scratch with their plans. Totally get it that people are going to want their own take on their unit. Every lot is different. But if you're thinking of a 3-bedroom unit, we ask people to, you know, find the plan that's closest to what you want. And then if you want to start knocking out walls or enlarging a closet, that kind of a thing, it's much, much faster to start with an existing plan than going white sheet of paper and starting over. We've got a lot of design guidance on the website, things about advising, you know, more in depth on the size of an ADU, what are the steps to kind of get that perfect design, decorating, all the floor plans I showed you. So again, plenty to poke around for later. Best place to see that would be under ADU info. ADU design is where all that is housed if you want to see more. Okay, costs. I know a lot of you guys get these questions from your clients and want to be able to give a high level idea of cost. There's a bunch of different factors when you're building your ADU. So we're going to talk about the key ones today. Design and engineering is getting the actual set of plans and the construction documents ready to submit to the city. That's everything from the design process with the client and making all the tweaks that they need for their lot, to doing the things like energy calculations and all of the engineering and structural calculations that have to go into the full packet for the city. Also, depending on which city it is, there's between 5 and 15 forms that have to be filled out for the ADU. So handling all that, submitting it to the city, doing the revisions back and forth is $12,000 with Snap ADU for a standard set of plans. Architect firms will probably be comparable, maybe a little bit more depending on who you're working with. If you just pull a set of plans off the shelf and say, hey, I want to build these straight up, you're still going to have to customize it for your lot. So it's tough to get under, I don't know, 6,000 to 7,000, even if you're just using a guy to do this, if you have a draftsman or something like that. On the next bucket, I would say next one you have to think about is the permits and fees. We already talked about that being about $10 a square foot for the fees that are still in place for ADUs. Site work pertains to getting the actual building pad ready for the ADU. So before we can start constructing the structure, we have to deal with prepping, trenching all the utilities, getting the site level, all that jazz is about $25,000 for a flat lot. If there's something like a steep hill, or there's a pool right there, or you have to go up a flight of stairs to get to the backyard and I can't drive a Bobcat back there, all those things trigger additional costs in this regard. And that's exactly what we would iron out during the proposal process with our homeowners. Next huge bucket, and about 95% of your cost for this would be the building itself, including all the finishes. That's going to vary widely depending on which unit you're looking at. We'll talk about that in a second. Solar is required on all new construction in the state of California. So ADUs will have to either have a solar array on them, or if you have an existing solar system on the main house, you can add panels to that you designate to support the ADU. If people have existing solar, that's usually the cheaper way to go. But if you're putting a new system on an ADU, it starts at around $10,000. So how much do these units themselves cost? The smallest units we build are little 1-bedrooms. Right now, the all-in construction cost, including quartz counters, appliances, all the fixtures, the flooring, starts at about $235,000, and it's a nice unit. Like our standard finished packages are definitely I would say above an investor grade, because they do have upgraded counters and a bit nicer in that regard. The largest units we build, the 1,200 square footers, in most places, are about $375,000 for the absolute biggest one with 3 bathrooms. It's a small house. And so what you're going to see here is the cost per square foot is going down sharply when you get to these bigger units. And just so you guys know this, it's because the mobilization costs for us to get our our foundation guys out there, or the site work crew, or framing, like the base cost to get any trade out to the site are the same. And to build a 500 square foot unit versus a 1,200 square foot unit, the differential there does not just hold and just say, oh, just add $2 a square foot. Like that big mobilization charge is what's driving a lot of this cost. The other thing is the floor plans cost the same no matter how big of a unit you're building. The management costs on our side to have somebody in touch with you about all your selections and managing your job, that cost is the same no matter how big you're going. And also the kitchen and the bath are the same size in a lot of these instances, but there's way less empty space that we're building. So the bigger that you go, the better the cost per square foot is going to get. And if people are saying, oh, I built a house in 2015 and it cost $200 a square foot. Number one, know that build costs have gone up like 30 to 40% since then. And number two, if you're building a 2,000 square foot house, it's a much better deal per square foot than a small building. So that's just an important thing to kind of go in with the knowledge of. I'll also say on the small units, if somebody can fit, a little 500 square foot unit and they have a pretty open lot, a modular option might be worth considering, because for the smaller units, those can be a more cost-effective solution. For the bigger ones, they don't even offer them this big. And secondly, just building them on site is basically the same cost, if not cheaper in some cases than the modular ones. So if you have a client who's looking for a little bitty unit, happy to give you referrals to companies that do that. But the little ones, if you can take something off the shelf, they're usually cheaper if you do go modular, for all the reasons I just talked about with the fixed costs being high. Last thing I'll say about costs before we move into more glamorous things. We go through a whole checklist with our clients before they even sign with us of all the different items that are going to affect cost. We've also written about these things extensively so people can get educated on what these things are and whether they'd apply to their lot, what they should cost. And I will say, with folks that don't specialize in ADUs, we run up against competitive bid situations where somebody's thinking about an ADU and they either have this guy who's maybe done one of their ADU, but they've worked with them before, or they have us. And in almost every case, our bid is going to be higher. And the reason is we put every cost we know is going to happen upfront because we do not want to surprise people. Sometimes we'll get to strip them out. Maybe we'll find a way to shoehorn stuff in there and not have to upgrade their panel, but we're going to tell them what that's going to cost if we have to do it, if we think that that's the case. So just to put it out there, that's kind of the philosophy on how we do this. So it's good in some ways if you're an investor, because you're going to be able to pencil out all that information from the get-go. But on the downside, a lot of people are shocked to see what the all-in costs are. And so we have all this available on the website. If your clients are looking at that, we've got a whole page just devoted to costs. You can see what I'm talking about with the cost per square foot going down dramatically if you go up to bigger units. You can also see what we think the all-in cost will be when you actually account for all those different factors. So again, it's just something that is, it's not as cheap as some people think out of the gate. For a lot of people though, in coastal San Diego or coastal North County, it still makes a lot of sense. So again, it's just going to really be a case by case thing. If you are looking at floor plans on our website, every single one of these has the build price on it. So if your clients are looking around, like they'll have, kind of the full picture at their disposal. Okay, I'm going to pause again. What burning questions do we have about cost or design?
Hey, Whitney, this is Matt. Question, do you guys have designs to do an ADU above a detached garage?
I'm so glad you asked. We do. There's a whole section on that in our 2 stories. We have a couple of these under construction right now. A one bedroom fits really well above like a 2-car garage. If I can find this. We've got the 1 bedroom above like a 2-car garage. And then somebody's actually building a really nice big one. It's an oversized garage with a 2-bedroom above it. So this is the small 1 bedroom. It's like right at 500 square feet. And we actually, I think have 2 people building this right now. It's in construction still. Then this larger unit can fit a 2-bedroom up above it. This is a pretty popular plan anyway, with a garage below. And we're building this in Carlsbad, I think. Yeah.
And are these plans both ground up, or are they retrofitting an existing 2-car garage?
These are ground up. Pretty much though, I would imagine you'd be able to fit that above a typical garage. That's what we kind of designed this one around. If you're looking to do an addition above an existing, there's definitely some calculus around like, does it make more sense to start over or save the garage? That's a question we get a lot. So we've actually got a blog on this topic I can send to you guys if it's helpful. It's like, should I demo my garage or should I try to retrofit it? So I can find this.
Do they have to change the foundation or the footing or anything like that if they're going to build above?
Gary, that's the crux of the issue. It's like, what kind of a foundation are you dealing with? Do you have to reinforce it? So if you have an old garage, a lot of times it's faster, cheaper to just scrape it and start over versus try to retrofit it. If you just built the garage 10 years ago, it's probably going to be better to convert it. So this article goes into a lot of the different, costs and like things to consider. It's super case by case, what's going to make the most sense. As far as getting that work done, we don't do addition work. So we actually suggest a couple of different architecture firms to start with on that if you're thinking about expanding over an existing space.
Okay.
Other burning cost questions, design questions? Otherwise,
I don't know if it's a cost question, but you had mentioned if they're doing like a 1-bedroom, a small 1-bedroom, it might be more cost effective to do a manufactured home or right? Is that the same? Is that going to still be considered an ADU? Like, is there anything different with the cities or their zoning or anything like that? Or it's treated the same way as a regular ADU?
It's still classified as an ADU. We have a whole blog on this too, because it's kind of a complex topic. The difference comes in financing. A lot of times you can't qualify for the same kinds of financing if you're doing it manufactured versus stick built. We've got this nice little chart kind of comparing your different options. A modular versus a manufactured is different as well. Manufactured is if it's kind of like would have historically been called a mobile home. Like the whole thing is like constructed offsite, trucked in. It doesn't have a regular foundation. It has to still sit up on different kind of supports, versus modular components are built and then assembled on site. So all of these have different pros and cons. But I think if I had to summarize this whole article for you, they are all counted still towards that ADU limit. You can't like get around it by doing a manufactured and like it's not counted. Like they're still counted as an ADU.
Gotcha. Okay.
Financing is different, and so is like the payment structure and timeline, and really the customizability. We end up kind of doing probably more of these family, a bit higher end ones, because it's people that don't want a modular product that they can't customize, either because their lot is constrained, they're going bigger than modular can accommodate, it's fancier than modular can do. So if you're an investor, you have a big lot and like you really have room to park a modular back there, I would probably advise you to do that. Like if you can make one of those work, it is often cheaper, but there's just all these other factors that come into play.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
So I got a question, Whitney, kind of like off that topic. So if somebody were to come to you guys and kind of look at the option of potentially building an ADU, but then they kind of realize maybe it might not be as cost effective as they thought it was going to be, and they're kind of thinking about potentially going either the modular or like manufactured route, do you guys happen to like work with companies or have contacts that can help them, I guess, kind of achieve that goal?
Yeah, I would definitely start with Crest Backyard Homes. They are based in North County as well. Their owner, John Aronson's super nice guy and is also like a straight shooter, and will tell them if it's not a good option. He sends people to us and we send people to him. Just so you guys know, I don't get anything out of that. Like that's truly just my candid take on who you should start with. I would pick them because they are local. There's other companies like a Bodoo, Studio Shed that you might come across. They are statewide or more national. And frankly, I don't think that at this time, what they offer is as good of a product as Crest does. So I'd go to Crest Backyard Homes.
Okay.
And what is that name, Whitney? How do you spell that?
Crest, C-R-E-S-T, Backyard Homes. The other thing to keep in mind, their payment structure is just going to be super different. We'll talk about that in a second, how ours looks, but a lot of that payment has to happen up front since it is built in the factory. So again, different people have different opinions on what they want to do with that.
Perfect segue. That was my question. Is what kind of financing options do you have? Is this, homeowner basically got to do a HELOC? What are the options that you guys have for that?
Yeah, let's take a second to mention that because I don't think I have a slide on that anyway. As with most of these things, can go to our website under ADU. There's a ADU info. There's a whole financing page. The long and short of it, people used to get HELOCs like almost always for these because they could and the rates were cheap. But that's not a long-term financing answer. So what we're seeing more people do now is a fixed rate second position loan. There's a company called Renault-Fi. Where's our page on this? That offers this product. And they have different types of products that have longer terms. I can send you guys this link as well. But what the unique thing is here, you can actually get a loan based on the future value of the property. And if you're doing like a home equity line or something, unless you have equity in the property, there's obviously no option there, right? So a lot of people just bought their property and they want to do an ADU. They already have a loan in place. They have a 4% rate. They're like, I'm not going to go refi this. That'd be stupid. I'd have a 7% rate. So Renault-Fi offers a fixed rate second position mortgage based on the future value of the ADU. There's obviously all sorts of like, debt to income limits and like you would with a regular loan. But this company has been kind of our new, like in the last 6 months, since interest rates went way up, this has been the new go-to for us on how to get financing for these. So we can send out the link to that too. Ashley, I can send this to you after if that's helpful. But other methods people are, doing, you can get a construction loan for these. A lot of times the conforming limits though in our area make that difficult. So it's really going to depend on what the primary home value is at, if you can get this construction loan to work. I would say though, if you guys have clients looking for financing, we would usually first try to get a traditional product. Like if they do have equity in their house and they're willing to wait for the refi, like that's a good option, but a lot of people are scared by that. Second place would be the fixed rate second. The rates are still going to be, prime plus half a point, something like that. It's not great. It's not terrible. That's the crash course in financing. And we'll send out more resources after. Okay. How we can help you guys. So what do we do with realtors? We get, first of all, just if you have our questions about ADUs, always hit us up. You can just use our contact form on our website. If you guys have my email from Ashley, you can hit me up and I'll get you to the right channel. So we can always help with that. What else do we do though? We can help with your listings that have ADU potential. So occasionally I'll have folks come to me and say, I've got this, listing going live in 2 weeks. I want to show what somebody could build. Help me kind of put this together. And we'll send you like a 10-page PDF that kind of shows what would fit on the property, some examples of the ROI that you would get if you were to do that as an investor, and just like a basics on kind of what the cost would be. So we can put together materials like that if you're looking at a listing. Or if you have a client who is looking at a property to buy and they want to know what the ADU potential is, we're happy to pull up that specific property, take the input from your client of what they want to build and tell them if it's possible. We do a lot of that for people as well. And I mentioned like things like coastal and overlay zones and any big watch outs, or is the slope too steep for me to even build? Like we can very quickly check for all of that for your clients. So we're happy to do that kind of work.
Is there a cost to that? Maybe you mentioned.
There's not a cost to that. No.
Okay.
I mean, if you have like one of those buyers that I know we all love that want to see 20 open houses with you, kind of the same feeling. Like at some point, we're probably not going to want to keep running up every single property if they're not super serious. But if they have a handful of them, happy to. Yeah. Referrals to ADU financing, and we talked about that. I can send you more details on that. It's just going to get real in the weeds and we'll run out of time today, but we can send more materials on that. Also documentation for lenders. So sometimes folks are looking to get a pre-qualification for a construction loan. If they do want to do that with an ADU, we provide all the documentation needed for that. That is part of the feasibility process for us. That is paid work. I don't know who asked that about the paid work, but I'll talk about kind of where that line stops, like where we would kick into like us doing more work than we can just offer for free. So what would happen if you had somebody that wanted to discuss their project? Our sales team is made up of Bob and Leslie. They've been with us for many years and know ADUs inside and out. They talk to 5 to 7 new homeowners every day. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say in the state of California, they're probably some of the most experienced folks at guiding homeowners on their options. As far as what would happen, we have a project assessment form on our website where you just fill in basics about what your property is, what you're attempting to build there. From there, we usually send just like high level budgeting info so that people have some ballpark idea of where the cost is going to be and if they want to continue looking at it. And from there, we would put together a consult time with them where we'd take an hour to use our feasibility software to pull up their property, put floor plans on their lot, and just kind of get to the quick and dirty version of a site plan of what they want to build. And then we can advise them on cost. From there, if they want a formal proposal, we'll put that together. Super detailed, it's like 50 different things we check for to get them our best idea of cost. From there, if they want to proceed, it would be going to a feasibility study with us. And that's where we go vet out all of the kind of first thoughts on what the costs are going to be and what that looks like. This is how detailed it gets. We do the full site plan, all the setbacks, map out where the ADU is going. We check through all these different considerations, both building code, also just site work costs. They get the whole picture. And we actually produce a final cost for them that we commit to for 6 months. So while we're permitting and we're getting their selections finalized, we're holding that cost, that price for them so that they're not worried about inflation. We had to do this. We went to this model about 6 months ago because people were freaking out. Obviously, I was too, about costs going up. So the way this looks then at a high level, if we back it up to when you first call us, if a homeowner first calls us, we spend usually a week or two just talking with them about their site and their vision, playing around with our software to put the floor plan on there, see how it looks, make sure it's going to generally work with what they have in mind, and putting together that highly detailed proposal. So all this work is just, there's no charge for any of this work. If they want to move forward from here into feasibility, that's the first time you're getting into paid work. And the difference here is we're fully vetting out everything by going and mapping their utilities. So we're actually sending somebody out to map out where all the lines are to make sure we know where they're running. Because if they're running right through the ADU location, we're going to have to move those. And we don't want to find that out when we're breaking ground. So we do all that up front. We also verify the placement of the ADU. We do a survey as part of that process to make sure that we're taking the measurements from the actual property line, not just like the fence that was installed in 1970 and is encroaching on the neighbor's lot. We deal with all that stuff during feasibility, make any adjustments we need to to the layout and then also update the costs accordingly. And that's where I was talking about, we sign off on a budget with the client before they move into the expensive construction documents. So this feasibility process up front, that part, I mentioned the $12,000 for design and construction documents. The first part of that is due when we deliver that feasibility study. Then if everything looks good, budget's cool, we move forward into construction and engineering documents. That's where we're putting together all the detail to actually submit to the city. When we submit to the city, the client's paying the balance of that design work. Plan check. So this whole process, this first design and feasibility part, usually between 2 to 3 months, depending on how many revisions the client has. And that's the main factor, is really the client turnaround on that. Then we're sitting with the city. And like I said, some cities are much faster than others. That's going to be between 3 and 6 months that we're going back and forth, doing all the revisions with them and getting to approved permits. While we're doing that, we have the client making all of their finished material selections. So that's when they're picking out their tile, their floor, their countertops, all that jazz, so that we can order those in time for them to be here when the build starts. And the build out itself, it's like 14 to 16 weeks. So, 3 to 4 months again in that timeline. Typical project, if it's all going well, 10 to 12 months. If there's a big snafu with the city, it can obviously go longer. So that's kind of the minimum timeline you're looking at. As far as the payments, then you can kind of see these going along the bottom. The construction draws are happening as we complete phases of construction. So they're happening in like 10 to 15% chunks of the build out cost along the way as we're finishing work. So that's what the overall timeline and payment structure looks like, compared to like the modular option. Like I mentioned, you'd be paying upfront here. When they go into permitting and production, you're typically paying like half upfront, half when it's delivered, something like that.
Hey, Whitney.
Yes.
So the 10 to 12 months completion time, is that regardless if it's a 1-bedroom, a 2-bedroom, or a 3-bedroom, or whatever?
Totally. The size has negligible impact. Maybe a couple of our trades would take a few days longer, but in all, it's typically the same.
Is that same, or what about if it was a modular, a little bit shorter, I would imagine?
Yeah, it's interesting. So again, I'm not a modular manufacturer. Like I don't know any of those day to day, but what I have heard is that the queue for them right now is quite long. Like to get into the process, there might be like an 18-month lead time to get your name up. So there's that lead time in a different part, versus like it is going to show up to your site mostly complete, and they're going to do the finished work on site for modular. And that process might take, I don't know, 6-8 weeks instead of 14 to 16 weeks. So you will have an active construction site for a shorter amount of time, but the total timeline, I don't know if it's going to be shorter, to be honest with you. I don't know.
Yeah, and kind of the rule of thumb there, the biggest variable here, the X factor, is that yellow bar right there is the plan check and permitting at the cities. That's just the biggest variable.
100%.
Yeah, and then the other thing about modular, you have to remember too, tell your clients that you don't just sit there and buy a house and it all of a sudden shows up one day, gets craned into the backyard and dropped on the ground, right? It's like,
yes,
there's still foundation work, there's still utilities that need to be run out to it, so on and so forth, right? There's still site work that's to be done. So, I mean, there's definitely pros and cons to each, but there's just little things to make sure that clients are aware of. And they'll, if they're really interested, they'll figure it out too when they're talking to the experts of it. But just so you know that there's that yellow band right there is the biggest variable, no matter where you're at.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, great ad, Matt. Thanks. Yeah, and go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I have a question, Whitney. So when we have potential buyers and we're looking at listings, and because sometimes we run across those buyers that are looking for property to where potentially in the future they can build an ADU.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we'll see listings where it says, great home, has potential for like an ADU, like in the backyard or whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
I guess what's a good place to start to see if that home can actually, it could build an ADU on it? Because that's a lot of, I guess, questions I've run into like recently, where it's like, can an ADU be put in the back? But it's like, would I send them over to the city first, or send them over to a company like you guys and kind of, I guess, figure out the process from there?
As long as there's room.
Yeah, as long as there's room. I mean, there's always going to be other stuff to consider, like distance from the primary home. Like it's either going to be 6, 10, or maybe in some cities they don't specify it, but it triggers fire rating. Like there's a million considerations. So could they go to the city? They could. I don't feel like that's necessarily going to get them the answer that they need unless it's a very specific question. So I would open us up and say, we are super happy to help your clients answer those questions. We've recently launched this part of our website on referrals, mainly to give you an easier channel to send us stuff. So I can send out this link after, but if you want to send people to us just to like send us the property and have us connect with them directly, if that's a better way for you to handle it, we are happy to. If you would rather reach out to us and just say, hey, I've got this property address, can you look it up for me? You can also just email us. Like that's totally fine too. So how about I follow up after this session with like the quick links where like if you want to send it through the website, do it here. You can also just shoot us an email if it's easier for you. I can follow up like that. But back to your question, I think we're probably a good stop because we also have, I can show you guys a sneak peek of this. We have our software that we would run it up in immediately, and we can see all of these interacting at once with the regulations and the setbacks and the topography. And we're also going to be able to tell you how much the site costs are going to be. So I just don't know of any other resource that's going to be able to tell you all that instantly, you know?
Yeah. Okay.
So what we'll do is run it up in our software that shows again, this is all going to be vetted if we get into paid work. This is what we're doing back in the envelope for free. We're moving around the property lines to make sure all that's in kind of the right place. You can see that the primary home is designated here. What we're going to do is put a floor plan on it. So if I can just grab one real quick. We're going to let's put a bigger one on it. We'll be able to put, this is a giant lot, so this isn't even like going to be hard, but we're going to look at where the topography is going to make it easiest to get to a buildable pad. And in this process, like we can see how many feet of drop it is across, like this is a 4-foot drop across corners. Like that's pretty big. We'd have to grade. So like we'd mess this, move this around to find a good spot for it, rotate this around, whatever we want to do. But the other important part we're going to check is the rules for it. So we know a lot of this anyway, it's on our website, but what this lets us see is the overlays. They've just moved all this stuff and I don't know where it is. Info. It's going to tell me if it's in high fire, if it's in coastal, if it's in a floodplain. So it's a very quick like snapshot of any property. And so when I'm putting together these packages for realtors, typically I'm running this up, putting an example plan on it, but per your feedback. And we're putting together an example budget and timeline for that for them. So that's kind of what that would look like.
So you just plug in the address and then this comes up and that's what you do, right? You're saying?
Yeah.
Nice.
We do. And then, we know what to look for. Like there's funky stuff that comes up where it's like, well, that's not right. And a lot of times if it's in some weird, like double overlay, we'll have to go dig in deeper, but it's a really good first shot. And it allows us to have a conversation with the homeowner really quickly because they can immediately see if it's going to fit or not, like what they had in mind. So it's a really good jumping off place. So this is a good segue to get through kind of the end of what I wanted to mention. Why do people choose us? It's mainly because of our expertise and that we've just done a million of ADUs. So we've just had more chances to get the system right. Like, as you can see, we've really ironed it out and we know exactly what's going to take to get it through. And also if you have problems coming up during the build out, we know when to push back. That's something that's happened more and more where a city is requiring, asking for us to do right-of-way work. Like they're asking us to upsize a utility or they're asking us to do an improvement in the right of way. And it's knowing when to push back on the city and how to justify that is super important. And if you don't have somebody who knows what they're doing, you're risking that you're going to do work that you don't have to do. So I feel like that's probably our biggest differentiation. That and the fact that we have the design and build in-house. So we're accountable for our own designs. We're the ones who are actually going to have to go and build them. Lots more information. Yeah, go ahead, Gary.
If you go back to that other slide, this is just me being stupid, but I'm pretty sure I know where that's at because I used to live right next door to the owner of Snap ADU.
No way. So you know Yucca Road very well then.
Yep, and because I saw his name and I went to school with a guy with the same name, but it's not the same person. And I thought it was him, and I go, oh, he bought the house right next door to where I grew up. And yeah.
That's where that is. We're having a team meeting.
I'm looking at the view, and probably where they're standing, I dug a hole with the previous owners when I was a kid. Paid me to dig a hole for their dog, and they made fun of me because I dug it like for a person, like for a casket. I did a big hole, and it's was in their backyard, probably where they're standing right there.
Well, that is a fun connection.
Anyways, that's just me
sure.
being goofy. Yep.
Oh, I love that. So yeah, we use a lot of tech throughout our operation too. Our homeowners have a portal that shows them all of the information about their job, and they make approvals there. So we've invested heavily in that. And if you're looking for just fun content on this, again, Web has a lot of resources. If you just are on our website, you can go to the footer and get right to our YouTube channel. And we've got, probably 15 tours at this point, a bunch of customer interviews, interviews from us. So a lot of, fun resources there for people just kind of thinking about ADUs and want some ideas. All right, guys, that was the end of my program content. You've been awesome with your questions so far. We've got 5 minutes. What other questions have we not hit?
Would you be the main contact? So I have relatives right now that we actually have an offer in, but it's already has an ADU attached to the house. But there's multiple offers. So if we don't get it, they're also looking at property where we can add an ADU. Would you be the first person I contact? Or have them contact, or? Yeah,
I would have them use our contact form. That's going to be the fastest way to get it into our team. I don't personally handle the initial conversations. That's Bob and Leslie. I do personally review every proposal that goes out the door. So I see them all at some point. But I'd use the contact button that you'll get a response within 8 hours usually.
Super. Okay, great.
Yeah, I'm not sure if someone asked this because I was on a quick call, but how would you kind of determine the value of an ADU on a property already? Would you kind of take like the current build costs, subtract any sort of like upgrades needed, or any advice on that? I actually have a listing right now that has an ADU on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm sure you guys know this. It's tough to get comps because at this point, there just aren't a ton of these. It's becoming more prevalent, but there's not a lot of comps. And so appraisals, if we're talking appraisals, are coming back all over the map. Super low in some cases, market rate in others. So I would say that you cannot bank on the appraisal. It's straight up. So as far as thinking about this, people are usually thinking about the ROI with regard to their cash flow and how that's going to affect the value of the property. That's what I see like most people doing. As far as how they're going to assess it and taxes, it won't affect the assessment of your existing structure. It's a blended assessment is what they call it. So they're going to tack on the additional value of the ADU. They're not going to put the sticker price that you pay to get it built. It's going to be, I don't know, 70% of that typically is what they'll accept. And then you're paying just that incremental on the tax. But rolling all this up into like, how do I think about the ROI? I already mentioned this article, so I kind of want to just find it for you guys on the site. We did a couple of case examples on if an ADU is a good investment. So that might be a good jumping off place for you. Let me share screen again. So in this, we talk about how much does it increase value and some thoughts about that. But there's a, like a workup of here's all the puts and takes of it and, how to kind of look at it. So I can send out all these links I've talked about in an email to Ashley at the end. Other questions, guys? My main goal is just that you have ADUs in the back of your mind and that you know where to go if you need help. We also, if we aren't the right company to help you, like if you're doing a conversion or thinking about an addition, like super happy to send referrals to architects that do this or builders in some cases. So we definitely want to make sure you guys get the help you need, even if it's not with Snap. So always feel free to ask if we can help.
Very useful information, Whitney. Thanks so much.
Yes.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Bye.